Welcome to another Live with Kevin on a special day at the end of the year. I'm so glad to have you with me to spend a little time with a very special episode of Live with Kevin. If you are here with me live on whatever social platform, I hope you'll say hello and tell us where you're from. That'll be awesome for me to know and for others to share. I haven't really kept track during the course of this year in terms of how many different countries we've had people join us live in, but I'm sure, very sure, that it's well over 20. I know that in the course of the last year, I worked with leaders from over 50 countries. And like I said, I know that it's well over 20 countries that have joined us this year. So please do say hello. Tell us where you're located. Let's see. And some people said they're here, but they'll be right back with us. So I'll try to share on one of the social channels. Hope that you'll do that. While you're here, I hope that you'll sit back and enjoy what we're going to do for the next little bit. Normally when I'm here, I have a guest, and today I do not. I'll explain that in just a second. But that doesn't mean that I don't want you to participate. And I do hope that you will share your thoughts and your ideas as we go throughout the course of this live. And in fact, if you have questions for me about the topic or about anything else, I'd be happy to answer those questions for you as we go. If you don't know, let's see, what have we got? We know we've got at least 2 countries already. Mark is joining us from Toronto, getting ready to get really cold there. I don't think it is yet, Mark, but I know it's going to be. And then we've got someone in Michigan, and Keith in Pennsylvania. Hi, Keith. Good to see you today. And Santiago says he'll be right back, but he is with us today as well. So continue to tell us that and let us know. And there's another Michigan, a member of my team, saying hello this morning. So if you are with us for the first time, let me tell you that this will eventually be actually sooner than usual, be an episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. And so in just a second, I'm going to do a countdown, and then I'll officially start this episode for the podcast. And normally when we're doing one of these live, they don't show up on the podcast for several weeks. But this one, because edition, if you will, it will go live on the podcast next week. RemarkablePodcast.com is where you can learn more about that. Good morning, Amber in Arizona. So glad that all of you are here. So I'm going to do the countdown now and sort of officially start the podcast, and then we'll dive in. And I think we're going to have a really great time together today. So let me do the countdown here. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to a very special episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. It's our year-end edition where we talk about and release the top episodes of the year, the most downloaded episodes of the year. And I will share insights from the year and some of my action items from each of these top podcasts for the year. My name is Kevin Eikenberry, and I'm so excited to be with you. This is another live episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast where we are helping leaders grow personally and professionally to lead more effectively and make a bigger difference for their teams, organizations, and the world. And if you are listening to this on the podcast, just a few days, in this case, after I've been live, you can join us live in the future on your favorite social platform. And the way to learn more about that is to check us out on Facebook or LinkedIn and join our groups there, either at remarkablepodcast.com/Facebook or remarkablepodcast.com/LinkedIn. I hope you'll do that. And so for all of you that are with us live, we're so glad you're here. And if you're listening later, I hope that you enjoy this as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Remarkable Development Sessions. A Remarkable Development Session is a webinar for a new world. We know that we learn in interaction with others, but in a fractured and increasingly virtual world, the workshop experience has been shifted to a focus on delivering the content and leaving the application to you as an individual. Today, we're focused very much on application, but even if you love learning from webinars, you've likely thought there's got to be a better way in a virtual world and to make webinars even better than they are. That's what we've done with Remarkable Development Sessions. You can learn more by going to kevineikenberry.com/remarkable development to learn more and register for an upcoming session on a valuable skill. We have one of those coming in January. So having said that, let me dive into this episode as we talk about a review of 2021 on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. I did some work this morning and looking this up. We started this podcast in 2016, and between episodes like this and the short replays of our Remarkable TV videos, there's 640, I believe, episodes total. 360 some of those are with a guest. And since we started in 2016, we've had a variety of guests. Clearly, we've had a few duplicates. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. And ever since the end of 2018, I've done some sort of a year-end wrap-up episode. So I've gotten a little bit better at this over time, I would like to say. I would tell you that during this year, we've had guests join me from at least 5 countries who have joined me in almost every case live. Nearly all of the episodes this year with a guest have been done live. I think there's been a handful that were recorded. And during the course of this year, I would say we've had 3 guests who are internationally famous for the long haul, having written many bestsellers, including Bill George and Tom Peters, Tom back for the second time, and Ram Charan. All of these gentlemen are multiple-time best-selling authors. It was an absolute honor to have them join us this year. And while we've had a number of other tremendously successful guests, of course, there are a couple that are also multiple-time best-selling authors, not quite as old, if you will, as those first 3, not quite as distinguished of a career for as long a time. But Keith Ferrazzi joined us again this year, and Liz Wiseman joined us. I was so excited to have Liz join us. So those 5 people of the 50 or so guests this year, I think you could underline and say these are multiple time best-selling authors, and I've been happy to have all of them join us. During the course of the year, we work hard to try to bring to you the best guests with the best new ideas. And so it would make sense. And I guess because many of our guests have written new books, and that's part of why they're here, it would make sense that many of the topics that we talked about are among the most talked about and written about topics of the year in the business press, and certainly in sort of the business media. So if I look at the whole year, it won't surprise you to find probably that we've had a number of guests and a number of conversations about organizational culture. We've had a number of conversations about employee engagement. We've talked a lot about mental health and mental fitness. We've had a tremendous number of conversations about relationships, both as the title of an episode or the core idea of an episode, but also a number of times throughout other episodes, the idea of the importance of relationships for us as leaders and as individuals have come up. And there's been a tremendous amount of conversation about change. And some of those topics will show up in our top 6 episodes as I introduce those. So I'm going to introduce those winners in a few minutes. But before I do that, some overall observations about those top episodes and what we learned from them. And again, if you're with us live and if you've got a question, please feel free to share it. If you have an observation or if you happen to like any of these episodes and you want to comment on those, please do that. But again, if you've got a question for me as we go, let me know. So let me share some of my insights, the insights about these 6. Then I'll introduce these 6 most downloaded episodes of the year. And then I will share sort of my lessons from each of them specifically. Okay, so that's sort of where we're going to head over the next few minutes. So two of the episodes were very much about change itself. And while I think there's an element of change in all 6 of these most downloaded episodes, 2 of them were nominally about the change topic, which I said is one of the bigger topics of the year. 2 of the episodes were really about our growth as individual leaders and what it takes for us and some specific skills that we could be working on and learning to get better. 2 of the episodes are about that specifically. One of the episodes is about competition in a digital world. So sort of a high level look at business and what's going on in the competitive marketplace. And then another one of the books that, while it certainly contains lessons for us as an individual leader, is really more of a book about career progress for us as well. So one of my goals, and I said this at the start of this episode, as I do at all episodes, and that is that it's our goal here at the Remarkable Leadership Podcast to help you grow both as an individual leader and to help your organizations grow as well. And I think it's true about all 6 of these that I'm going to announce here in a second, that there were lessons for us organizationally, and there were certainly lessons for us as individual leaders in all 6 of these episodes. So, and one more thing about these, sort of an inside baseball thing, 5 of the 6 that I'm going to announce to you in a second were the first 5 episodes of the year. So in some ways you would think, oh, they've been out there the longest, so they've had the most chance to be downloaded. So there's probably some truth to that, but I think you'll find incredible quality in those 5. But the number 1 episode of the year, most downloaded, is also one of the most recent. So when we get to that, I think it's worth noting that it didn't have the chance to be downloaded by new listeners throughout the course of the year, but is one of the newest of them all. So let's talk about and introduce the 6 of these in order. We'll sort of do it in Casey Kasem backwards forward kind of number. So number 6, the 6th most downloaded episode of the year, was a conversation I had with April Wren about her book Flux: How to Survive in Times of Change. And so the subtitle of this book is 8 Superpowers for Thriving in Constant Change. By the way, I have copies of 5 of the 6 books with me. One of the books I read digitally, and in fact, it is number 5. Number 5 on the list is from the ultra successful, multiple time best-selling author Ram Charan, and we talked about his book Rethinking Competitive Advantage, which is his latest book and was the topic of our conversation in the 5th most downloaded episode of the year. The number 4 most downloaded episode is the one that I would say is maybe more of a career book, a bit different for us here, but it's with Beverly Jones, Find Your Happy at Work, subtitled 50 Ways to Get Unstuck, Move Past Boredom, and Discover Fulfillment. This conversation, I think, is especially useful because it helps us as individual leaders, but it really is of great value for us to think about for our team members as well. Lots of great things to help them, because it wasn't written directly or only or specifically for leaders. And so Beverly and I's conversation isn't just about us as leaders. Find Your Happy at Work. The 3rd most downloaded episode of the year is called The 100X Leader: How to Become Someone Worth Following. A conversation that I had with Jeremy Kubicek, who co-wrote this book with Steve Cockram. And it was a pleasure to have Jeremy on, and we had a great conversation last January, or it was live in January, it was released in January, about what it means to be a 100X leader. We'll talk about my lessons from that here in a second. The 2nd most downloaded episode of the year is with Jeff Brown, and we talked about his book Read to Lead. And to which I would say that of all of the people that I met virtually in the past year, he's one of the folks I've learned the most from, not just from the episode, but from my ongoing following of him on social media and the recommendations that he's given that I have taken from that. So conversation with Jeff Brown, Read to Lead, tremendous book, tremendous conversation. And then the number 1. So all of those were early in the year episodes. And first, they were the first, not in that order, but they were the first 5 episodes of the year. But the number 1 most downloaded episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast this year just came out in November, and it's with Chuck Mahler. And the book and the episode are titled Becoming an Agile Leader. Here's the book: The Rise of the Agile Leader. Can you make the shift? In which we talk about the idea of agile principles and how we can apply that to us as leaders. Clearly, this is a book that talks a lot about change. So there are, without a drum roll, the 6 most downloaded episodes of the year. And the other thing, though, that I promised in this episode is sort of my lessons. If you've listened to or watched any episodes of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, you know that I always ask this question at the end, near the end of every episode. I ask the question of, now what? And I challenge you to take some action from what you've learned. And so certainly I could say that for you today and say, go back and listen to 1 or more of these episodes if you haven't. I hope that you'll do that. But what I promised in my preview is that I would share my answer to those questions from each of these 6 episodes. So that's what I want to do now. And I'm going to look at my notes to do that. So what I want to do is share one of the things that I've applied and I've been challenged by from these particular episodes. And so let me do that now. So from my conversation with April about flux, she and I talked a lot about the idea of moving from trying to predict what change will come to simply being prepared for the fact that it's going to come. And that's something that I've worked really hard with my team on this year, is to worry less on exactly what's going to happen, but for us to be better prepared for whatever is going to come. So I've worked hard as an individual leader to help prepare myself and our team for those kinds of things. Ken said he missed numbers 6 and 7. Well, there's number 6 right there. We were just talking about my lesson from April. In number 5, which is about rethinking competitive advantage with Ram Charan, the thing that I took from Ram's conversation that I challenged myself throughout the course of this year to work on is the idea that learning is, in fact, a competitive advantage. If you know me, have worked with me, have listened to me, have learned from me at all, you know that I'm a big believer in learning as one of the key competencies for us as leaders. And, we have built our business and I have built my career around the idea of learning. And yet I re-established this for myself this year, the idea that to think of learning as a competitive advantage for our company, but also for us as individual leaders. And so I find myself in an interesting spot by reading a book each week to prepare for an episode here. And yet also, as wonderful as these books are that I get the chance to share a conversation with for you on the Remarkable Leadership Podcast, there are other things that I want to be reading as well, right? So I'm challenged to not only keep up with what I'm reading for all of your benefit, and of course for my benefit too, but also the other things that I want to be reading for my own development and for the development of our organization. And so to be thinking about it as a competitive advantage is incredibly valuable for me. And it's been one of the things that I've worked hard to do this year. And the number 4, a most popular download was my conversation with Beverly Jones. And this is a book with 50 ideas in it. So 50 short chapters, 50 things. And the thing that my answer to the now what question in my conversation with Beverly was about enjoying your free time. And the lesson, and what I've tried to do this year is, I work pretty hard to try to have good work-life balance. And I have lots of things that I enjoy in my life besides my work, as much as I enjoy my work. But what I was challenged by Beverly to do was to be more intentional about my free time and to use it to the fullest. I don't want to make it sound like I'm trying to be type A about my free time, but rather to simply be more intentional and aware of how I'm gaining joy from and value from my free time. So, and that doesn't necessarily mean that every moment of my free time is planned. It is certainly free, but I've worked really hard to get better at that this year. And I want to thank Beverly for that. My conversation with Jeremy what it means to be a 100x leader, we talked about the idea of a Sherpa. And the Sherpa is moving, because the idea of this book, and you can see it on the cover if I get it back far enough, that the idea of moving to the mountaintop is a big sort of metaphor in the book. And so he and I talked about the idea of being a Sherpa, the leader as a Sherpa, and that the Sherpa is not trying to get to the top. He's trying to help as many people get to the top. He or she get as many people to the top as they can. And so that challenged me to be even more intentional with my team about developing them and helping them achieve the things that they want to achieve, and to try to be a better coach for my team, because clearly that's a part of our job as a leader. And so Jeremy challenged me, and I've tried hard this year to work on that. The second most downloaded episode of the year was my conversation with Jeff Brown, who co-wrote the book Read to Lead. And so we've already talked a little bit about reading and how much reading I try to do and need to do. But one of the things that I learned from Jeff is a little bit about reading differently. And what I realized is that there was a time in my career when I read in a more, I think, a more diligent way, more time in taking notes and more time with a highlighter and all that sort of thing. And in part because of this podcast and needing to read to be successful, to have a successful conversation with our guests, and to make it a better episode for you, my reading became often a little bit too perfunctory and for that purpose. And so I've rededicated myself to reading for the purpose of my own learning and not just to prepare successfully for a great conversation. So, and again, not everything I read is for the podcast, and yet a lot of it is. I mean, 50 some books each year for this purpose, plus a bunch more for our virtual LeaderCon event. So that put me into a habit that wasn't necessarily the one I wanted. And so Jeff challenged me and urged me in our conversation to be more diligent as a learner and to read differently, and really to read more like I once did and less like I did more recently. And I think I've gotten better at that. And the number one episode of the year was our conversation with Chuck Mahler about becoming an agile leader, based on his book, The Rise of the Agile Leader. And I think for me, one of the things that came up in he and I's conversation that it isn't probably necessarily a core idea of the book. I didn't look this morning to see if there's a chapter on this topic. But we had a conversation that talked a lot about the need for us to be more appreciative of our teams. And I would hope that my team would say I'm pretty good at this. I would say I'm probably better than average at this, but I know I could be far better. And so in my conversation with Chuck, one of the things that I took from it is that I need to work harder and be more intentional at being appreciative of my team for what they do for our clients and what they do for me and what they do for each other. And so I've been working hard over the last several weeks since my conversation with Chuck to try to get better at that, to show my appreciation for the team and for others, including our clients and others as well, for sure. So those are my lessons. I told you that I was going to try to show you how I've practiced what I preach, when at the end of every episode, I ask you this question: now what? What are you going to take from it? So I will close this episode the way I close all their episodes when I have a guest. And that is, now what? What will you do with this? Perhaps you will take note of one of the things that I've worked on and say, I need to work on that myself. Perhaps there's one of these episodes that you didn't listen to or watch that you might want to go back and do. And perhaps there's one that you missed and you say, hey, that's what I need to go learn from. And so I hope that you do that. I really do. I hope that you found this episode, while different, you found it useful. And I hope that maybe most of all, that you will use something from what you got either today or in some other episode this year of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast or being with me live, and that you will use it to become a more effective leader, because the world needs us to be better leaders. Your team deserves you to be an even better leader. And that's why we're here, is to help you on that journey. And I hope that today and this podcast continues to help you do that, both now and far into the future. And if you don't know, I'll be back next week with another episode of the Remarkable Leadership Podcast. We'll see you then.